She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays the Day podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauren Brunslick. And if this is the first time you are listening to the podcast, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And if you liked the episode, feel free to, especially if you're listening on Apple, give it a thumbs up, give it 5 stars or 4 if you're like only mildly blown away. Although I will say I will probably get super offended because I base my entire existence on validation and approval from other people, but it's fine. No, it's totally fine. If you want to give it 4, that's cool. Kidding. You just keep your opinion to yourself if it's not 5. Or if you like the episode, I encourage, and you already have rated the podcast, just screenshot it and share it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love that. I'd love it. It helps other chiros find the podcast. Okay, so let's see what's on my mind today. There's this trend. There's lots of trends going around right now. Oh, actually, I just left Goodwill, and one of the trends going around on Instagram. Have you seen the paint the ghosts on like old paintings of just a field or something like that, and then like they paint ghosts on it? It's so cute. They didn't have anything at Goodwill that I felt inspired to do that on, but I did look. That wasn't the trend I was going to talk about, though. I was going to talk about how I must follow a lot of bomb-ass women who one of their bragging points right now is that they retired their husband. Like that. I don't know. We might follow different people. It's fine. But I'm going to say I laugh when I see it, but not at them. So just hear me out. I giggle to myself and want to like send them to Kirby because poor Kirby, there's no way in hell that man is getting retired early. Because he's too multi-talented. Like, I'm not going to, I'm thinking about these women. Okay. I think Jenna Kutcher was one of them who she probably started the trend. Like, I retired my husband at 32. And I'm like, well, Drew, that's Jenna's husband, is awfully hot, but he must not be that talented because my husband edits my podcast. Well, okay. He doesn't, I think he's technically producing. I don't know what he does for the podcast anymore because we also pay someone else to edit, but he's very involved. And he also runs like COO and CFO of my clinic. And he also helped me create a course and renovate an Airbnb. And I've got like 6 other ideas. And I can guarantee you every idea I have will need Kirby. It just will, because I'm not that talented. I'm a visionary, but when it comes to like all the other skills that are necessary to execute nonprofits and additional clinics and courses, and a lot of stuff. I can make a bomb ass ad, but like, I don't know how to put it out there. So this is just a sad letter to my husband saying, you're never going to get to retire early. You don't get to retire until I stop working. And that probably will never happen. Poor dude. So we'll just wait for the next trend. The next trend is hopefully I start 17 businesses that require my husband. I just launch planes and then he has to like keep them flying. So, I've had a couple messages from people asking about an update from the Parasite cleanse, because apparently I left y'all hanging and I didn't mean to. I just, I don't know. So yes, so I did a month and I noticed when I got off it, a lot more bloating. Like, I wouldn't have considered myself a bloaty person before, but I definitely noticed more bloating afterwards. I also noticed I started waking up in the middle of the night again to pee. And I didn't realize how much better sleep I was getting while I was doing it. Let's see. Are there other things? I don't know. Like, I would say in general, my stomach aches have been less. So like, that was kind of the main reason that I did it, was because I was getting pretty like debilitating temporary stomach aches that would last for a couple minutes. I've tried all sorts of stuff. And I was like, well, maybe it's just a parasite and I'll poop a big parasite out and I won't have stomach aches anymore. So that didn't happen. But I will say I'm getting less and they're less severe in general. The other thing is I need to do a second month. So because I'm 36 and I've never done a parasite cleanse, I kind of anticipated from listening to the episode that I was going to need a second month. And then I was also, because I have basements, I live in Wisconsin, we have basements. And I also anticipated I was after the second month going to have to do the mold cleanse. So it's kind of one of those, like, it's like a 3-month process. So I don't know. Like, I'm not going to say that it changed my life, but it also shouldn't have because I'm kind of 1 month in and I wasn't super symptomatic. I feel like a lot of people who would have big hardcore changes might be more symptomatic than me. And I don't know. So yes. And like, do I recommend it? Absolutely. I really liked hers because I've talked to other people who've done parasite cleanses and they were like really intense. And the Mrs. Rogers Hood one adds like tinctures and stuff. So it's softer on your body, which it might be why I need a second month and a mold. I don't know. But yeah, pretty confident stuff came out. That's all the information you're getting there. I'm not going to overshare in that, but no, I never saw like a 4 to 5 inch earthworm or anything like, whoa, nothing like super satisfying, but just like kind of mentally like, yeah, okay. So today's guest, I was laughing with Elise Rigney because we were talking on the phone. And I was telling her like, oh, I just recorded with Amy Spoelstra. Well, I actually said Spoelstra. And I was like, I'd never met her before or like didn't know who she was. And she's like, Lauren, do you live under a rock? How have you never heard of Amy Spoelstra before? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I just keep going through this world, meeting people for the first time. And they're like out there kicking ass and taking names. And I'm just like, oh, hi, I'm Lauren. Who are you? What do you do? So it was a delight. I had her on. I really didn't know much about her, and I learned a lot in this episode. Seems like a real cool chick. Definitely like is friends with all my friends. So I can't wait to meet her in real life. Oh, another funny, just little side story about my conversation with Elise. So Elise lives in a bigger town, Fort Collins. I don't know if you know this, but I live in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, tiny town, 8,000. So she told me on the phone that she had known that I was having a bad day like a week prior, and she wanted to send me something on DoorDash. And I don't know, apparently in bigger towns, you can send like cool stuff on DoorDash. Like I think she was looking to send me like a bottle of champagne or something like that. Well, in my town, so as soon as she said, I wanted to send you something on DoorDash, I just started laughing. And I'm like, what were your options? Arby's, curly fries, Quick Trip cheese curds, like Taco John's? And she's like, yeah, pretty much. I like found a Mexican restaurant and I was going to send you queso. But then I was just like, that's weird. And so she didn't send anything, but like, I'm just imagining just getting a knock on the door and it's DoorDash and the Mexican restaurant that you can order from on DoorDash, the way they deliver queso is in a giant white styrofoam like drink cup with like a drink cap on it. So I just picture like the doorbell ringing and going to my door and the DoorDash person just handing it to me because, you know, they hate their life. And me looking at this giant cup of queso and being so damn confused. Like, and then seeing a message from Elise being like, I hope this makes your day. And me just being like, what the hell is going on? Why did she send me queso? So it was more of one of those, the thought was all that matters there. The joys of living in a small town. But like you can send cool stuff in big towns on DoorDash when your friend's having a bad day. Like who knew? Who knew? Okay, so Amy Spoelstra, she teaches chiropractors, educators, and other medical professionals around the country and internationally about neuro-deflective disorders. I've never heard it called neuro-deflective. I've heard of like non-neurotypical. I didn't ask what neuro-deflective is. because I just am reading her bio now and I don't know what that is. Neuro-Deflective. Anyways, and the focus approach to comprehensive patient care for children and adults with behavioral, learning, socialization, and developmental challenges. She's a mom, wife, clinic owner, and founder of the Brain Blossom Program and Focus Academy for continued education for certified focus practitioners and Brain Blossom Educational. She's published research under the Focus Academy on and plan for big things in this realm. And she's fantastic. So let's pray. And then we can all meet Amy Spoelstra for the first time. Or if you don't live under a rock, you'll be like, hey, Amy, nice to see you again. I totally know who you are because I'm not an idiot like Lauryn. All right, take a breath in. Connect with something. Connect with your heart. Connect with your breath. Try and take this second just to ground. If you can, close your eyes for just 10 seconds. That's all I'm asking you. Can you just take a breath with me? If you're driving, please don't close your eyes. That's dangerous, yo. Relax the tension from your face. Hi, friend. I hope you know that you are doing such great things. And check in with what's stressing you out today. Are you in fight or flight yourself? So often, I heard this thing the other day that talked about so often what's stressing us out is that our timeline is wrong. And we just have this short timeline. The house needs to be cleaned today. I need to respond to that email now. That stressful thing at work needs to be taken care of and handled in this moment. And we're just seeking for answers and solutions to all, goals to be hit. We're frustrated that our numbers aren't where they're at because we set a timeline for 2023. By January 1st of 2024, I'm going to be here. I'm going to have lost that weight. I'm going to have done this thing. We're going to have built the house. We're going to have started the podcast, whatever your goals are. And a lot of times our stress comes from our expectations not being met and their expectations that we put on ourselves. And so often the goal is good. The expectation is great, but maybe it's just your timeline. So I ask you to think about whatever's driving you into a sympathetic tone today, of fight or flight, to check in. And if you just give yourself a little more bandwidth in that time, if instead of hitting that revenue number by the end of 2023, you said, I have until the end of 2025 to hit it. Would you just feel less stress in this moment? And are your actions going to change? No, you're going to do your best to hit whatever goals you've set for yourself. But does it feel better in your body holding that goal without feeling like you're disappointing yourself because you're not hitting some completely pointless date on a calendar that you set as your version of success? All right, if you have your eyes closed that entire time, sorry, I told you 10 seconds, but you should know by now I get on too many tangents. I want you to know I love you. I want you to be kinder to yourself today. Just kinder to yourself for the next 15 minutes. Can you just hold on to keeping negative thoughts out for the next 15 minutes about yourself? An hour? Hey, that'd be great. The entire day? I would love that. But just talk to yourself like you would your own kiddo or your best friend, or like I would talk to you. So in your name we pray. Amen. I love you. And without further ado, here is my episode with Dr. Amy Spoelstra. Enjoy. All right. So where are you? Are you in?
So my practice is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Okay.
And that's way at the top of Idaho, close to Canada. And so I'm from Michigan, right? So we use our hand.
Yes.
Originally I'm from Michigan.
Wisconsin does too.
Oh,
yeah.
Wisconsin.
Well, we just flip it and then we really exaggerate the thumb for Door County. It's not as good as Michigan, but.
Okay, but listen, here's the deal. Being a Michigander, now living in Idaho for 16 years, I'm well, this is Idaho, right? So I'm this. So we're up here, like this. That's where I live. So
I'm
everything
sure I
can
don't
work
even.
with a hand.
I don't know that I would ace a geography test of really where Michigan, or not. I know where Michigan is. Of course, Idaho is. But like you said, it's right by Canada. Yeah. My brain was I guess I don't know where Idaho is.
You know what? You are not alone. In fact, I can admit that before I moved here, I didn't really know much about Idaho either. So it's like we're next to Washington and Montana. We're like sandwiched there, right? And it's the Pacific Northwest. And so people always think about like they get confused with Iowa and they think like, oh, potatoes. But I'm in North Idaho, and North Idaho is in the mountains. And it's like being from Michigan, my husband and I were like, we want lakes. Like, where are the lakes? And we first visited Boise, which is in southern Idaho, which is where the potato farms are.
Okay,
And
so there are Idaho potatoes. Yes.
yeah, but not where we're from. So we're like 8 hours like from Boise. And so we're in Coeur d'Alene. So it's way up at the top. So it's like almost to Canada and like 90 miles. And then we actually live. So we have a practice for 16 years in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And then last year we moved even further north to Sandpoint, Idaho, which is a little ski town about an hour north. And we're opening a satellite clinic there. And our daughter goes to a Waldorf school there. We just love it there.
So where's
Yeah.
the nearest Chiro school for you
Um,
from where you are?
Chiro school would be Portland, Western States, which I went to Sherman. So
Oh, okay.
super different. Yeah.
Well, don't
So
judge me. I went to Northwestern, but I
I'm
chose
not
it
done.
because of geography.
Yeah.
I was so green going into chiropractic school that I had no concept that where you went mattered.
Mattered.
I was just like, okay, well,
I'm
there's
gonna
one,
go
two.
there.
Yeah, I'm gonna go there.
I almost did that too. I actually had no idea either. And I learned about chiropractic, and I was a freshman in college. This is a weird story. I was at the University of Hawaii for my first year of college. I just was like, I'm out of here. And I met my lifelong friends there, which was amazing. So I was definitely supposed to be there. But one of my best friends, who's still one of my best friends today, like 22 years later, her dad worked for CJ Mertz of waiting list practice in
Okay.
Austin, Texas, which was like a big management group back then. Still is, but it was like really big back then, like kind of the old school heyday of like
Yeah.
management group
Mm-hmm.
chiropractic. And he was the audiovisual guy for the seminars. And I was visiting them in Austin, Texas, that freshman year of college, like in between or whatever. And he said to our group of friends, he said, if I could do anything, if I could start over and do anything, I'd be a chiropractor. And I was like, what? And I was thought I was going to go to law school and do business. And I grew up in a neuro-optometry family. So which my dad was like a real leader in that field. And so I grew up with like learning neurology and about behavioral learning, socialization challenges, and abnormal eye movements in the brain from a really, really young age. And I was like, I want nothing to do with that. I don't want anything with that. And so I'm gonna be a lawyer. And so I hear this dad of my friend says, I'm gonna be a chiropractor, or I would be a chiropractor. And I was like, I don't understand. Like back pain, like why? And he was like, no. And he told us about innate intelligence. And I was like, what? That's amazing. Like that makes sense to me. That fits my view of the world and what I knew about, from neuro-optometry. And I was like, I need to do that. And so I changed everything, but I still didn't know that that was not what all chiropractic was. And so I was going to go to Western states because it was in Portland and I wanted to live in the Pacific Northwest.
Mm-hmm.
Until I met a chiropractor who I became a CA for. And she was like, you're not going to Western states. You're going to Life. And Life in
This
Atlanta.
podcast definitely not brought to you by Western States or Northwestern Health Sciences University.
I mean, I'm kind of
I'm just
gathering.
waiting for a cease and desist from my alma mater, just being like, girl, like, can you
could be nice.
stop?
You could be nice.
They asked me to come back and like speak at their career services day. And they're like, we have a lot of students who like love your podcast. And I'm just like, do you listen to the podcast?
Have you listened? Don't listen to it.
Don't listen to it.
It's great. I love it.
So how do you find, do you have an easy time bringing in associates? Because like, I feel like how you're describing Idaho sounds lovely, but you're not Nashville and you're not Denver. So nobody wants to go to you.
Right. That's true. It's interesting, particularly in the last since the pandemic, North Idaho has started to become discovered
Okay.
because it's such a I mean, I'm like, do I want to say too much? It's such a beautiful place. And it's not, we don't have a huge population, but we have enough and we're close to Spokane. That's our airport, Spokane, Washington. And it's just so beautiful. And we were very, very free and very open and very, and so we've had a huge growth here in the last few years. It's been growing anyways, but we've had a big, big, big surge in population. And so more people are interested. However, yes, it does usually take when looking, like most people are not like, oh, I want to go to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. But with our work in the Focus Academy, thankfully, I'm really appreciative of how much interest and growth we've had and just how many people, students and doctors are so excited about our work that I have a lot of people wanting to work in our practice now for the practice, and then they learn about the location,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And how big is Coeur d'Alene?
So Coeur d'Alene is it's probably between 80, 90,000 people like in Coeur d'Alene, like proper. And
Mhm.
I could be, it might be more than that, just it's hard to know with the growth in the last,
Yeah.
year or 2 years. But when I moved here, just to give you perspective, in the Coeur d'Alene, like Coeur d'Alene, it was 30,000.
Oh, wow.
And that
That's
was in, 2000, very beginning of 2008. And so, yeah, it's grown a lot. It's grown a lot.
so you said you've been in practice 16 years. And I'm assuming always on this area of expertise, right?
Yeah.
Behavior in children, neurology, pediatrics. Have you found like how have you shaped your message from like a marketing perspective
Mhm.
in like, because I feel like in the beginning, well, both of us started, so I'm in my 13th year. Facebook
Mhm. Mhm.
existed, which,
Mhm. It didn't
but in
really, I mean,
I
it
was gonna say,
existed, but it
like, not
wasn't
to kind of call
used.
you out, but like it kind of
Yeah.
really didn't for
No, it
you.
really didn't. It's
I'm
so
3
funny.
years
It
younger
didn't.
than you in practice, but like
You're
I
a
remember,
young pup.
yeah. But I mean, I'm the age where like I was at the U of M for my freshman year, and Facebook, for all the Gen Z listening, Facebook started only at certain colleges. And so,
Mhm.
like, it was a really big deal because the U of M was one of the colleges that they were like trying it out on. So then, like,
Yes.
starting a practice 7 years later, it was like, yeah, I'll have a Facebook page for sure. But like, it was not like, okay, step one, marketing, Facebook. That like, and
Yeah.
so how do you like continue to reach people with this message? Like, what have you had to alter your marketing or things like that?
Yeah. First of all, that is so funny. And I was at Michigan State. It's my second year, and then the rest of my undergrad, I went to Michigan State. And that was one of the campuses that started Facebook as well, or started integrating it because I had a Facebook account there. And I was like, what is this even?
Right.
I guess I'll do it. I don't really
I
know
guess
what it
I'll
is.
take the
Yeah.
pictures. How do I get the pictures from my, what were they called? Because you weren't taking pictures on your phone,
No,
but
no. It was the digital cameras with the
yeah,
like card, the SD
yeah,
card
yeah. And
things,
so you
and
had to
like
take it
that.
out and then like you'd upload like 40 photos to on Sunday from like, this
And
is us going
yeah, and then there was, like,
tailgating.
MySpace. Oh my gosh, it's great. This is great, and all of the, younger doctors out there are gonna be like, "Who are these ladies?" But you know what? I love this topic. I talk about it all the time when I'm mentoring docs or with our associate docs, and I just was talking to Sherman students yesterday on business and business planning and starting and marketing and all that, and I told this story, because, it was that. I was, early 2008, which right before I opened a cash practice, pediatric principled, specializing in behavior learning socialization challenges in North Idaho as a female chiropractor at 25 years old. Okay, there were a lot of things against me. Like even
Mhm.
this is bizarre to say, but even being a female provider in North Idaho back then was very, it was out. It was an
Interesting.
outlier. Yeah, which blew my mind, but it was. I had even some other providers who wouldn't like take meetings with me because they thought it was inappropriate.
Oh my God.
I was like, "Excuse me, what?"
This is only 16 years ago. Not
Yeah, yeah. North Idaho sometimes in some ways is like a little behind the times, but then it's really caught up. It's a really great place to live. Yeah, but it's really weird to think about like the changes that have happened. And yeah, when I always say I grew my entire practice by leading with the brain with my education, finding the common ground that people have in the community and that other providers have, like saying, hey, what do we agree on? What do we all know? And then leading with the neurology, leading with the brain, which is what I teach, lead with the brain, and then making the case with that, because the science, the neuroscience, it really does make the case for chiropractic as a clinical tool by, correcting and addressing altered neurological function and then its impact and consequences on the brain. So all of that to say, I did do that same thing just in different ways, right? So I built my whole practice on education by leading, meeting people where they were, finding the common ground, leading with the brain, making the case. But I did it because back then there wasn't social media, there weren't ads. I did it with literally community lectures, of which we would put flyers around town. I joined every service organization in town. I did every, all of the little Rotary lectures and Lions Club. And I just cut my teeth at learning how to communicate by communicating a lot and being at everything. And then I also did a lot of just community involvement. I created a lot of events where I would do partnerships and collaboration with other like-minded providers and do charity sponsorships. And then with that, there would be opportunities. I had these whole packages I set up to do like lunch and learns and, educate the community with a health talk. And I didn't do it kind of in the typical kind of old school dinner talk kind of way, but I did it in my own way, but still with just getting my message out. I wrote a weekly article in the newspaper and I advertised in the newspaper, like the print newspaper for like 6 years.
Oh,
Every
wow.
week we had an article. And hilariously, my husband is a better writer than I am. He's not a chiropractor, but he wrote them, but they were my name. So we'd go around town and they'd be like, "Oh, you're Dr. Amy, you write those articles." And we'd kind of like laugh, like, "Yeah, I didn't
Mhm,
write those articles."
mhm, mhm.
But they were all about, meeting people where they were, leading with the brain, not compromising what chiropractic is or our message, because you don't have to, but you also don't have to just like slam chiropractic down people's throats. You need to help them understand by meeting them where they are first. And so then social media started happening. And then it was like, okay, now I'm going to, not even until like maybe 5 years ago did I start advertising on social media for our community lectures,
Right.
but literally for the entirety of my practice, I've done a monthly talk on brain development and deflective development, behavior learning, socialization challenges once a month somewhere in our office, at the library, at a juice bar, somewhere. There's always a talk, minus like a few Decembers and Julys here and there.
Right. Once a month for
Once a
16
month.
years.
Yep.
Okay, so how have you, because I'm assuming that you've not been dipped in gold, and so you've had ones that have flopped.
Oh my gosh. The amount of times I've spoken to
Like,
one person
yeah,
or
oh,
zero people.
I prefer 0 over 2.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
2
me
I can
too.
take. I prefer 0 over 1. I'm just
Yeah.
like, "Oh god."
One is awkward. One
Like,
is
"Well, should
awkward.
I just sit? Should I still use the
Yep.
PowerPoint?"
I've definitely done that where I've been like, okay, well, instead of doing my PowerPoint to one person, I'm going to talk with this person and I'm going to make my case and still hit my, what I call communication pegs in this conversation and see, all right, what is it that you came here to learn? And so that's what I've done in those cases. I've definitely had, many times where nobody came. I've definitely had many, many times where I've had standing room only. And I got to tell you, even to this day, now our team members, our team doctors do the community lectures. And I don't do them unless it's like, I'll do like special ones, like I'll do one on reading or on, kind of the more complex topics that I just really love, but I'm do more teaching to doctors now. And our doctors are doing amazing. I teach our doctors in the Folks Academy to do the community lecture that I have done and perfected over all these years. And that's what our doctors do. But I like to talk about some of the maybe a little more complex topics, but the same, but still bringing people the same information. But the thing is that I got so much experience talking. Like sometimes if people wouldn't sign up for the lecture or show up, I would give the lecture to my staff, or I would give it to like my 1CA, and I would practice saying it, and I would practice my communication pegs, and I would practice, like my tonality, and I would just learn. And so you have to just be committed to doing that through the awkwardness of it all. And some of the best lectures to this day are the ones that actually are not standing room only. The ones that are like 5 people, and like all 5 people are like become long-term patients, or are like, that changed my life. And so I've learned to just show up and do it the same,
Mhm.
which is hard, but it is important.
I feel like so we had almost a monthly, but like we would kind of like change topic, but like
Mhm.
typically we would have 6 to 8 events a year where I was speaking. One, it built great CAs
Yeah,
because your CAs just like they
I get it.
learned this product that we're selling. And then the pandemic hit, and it was this awesome excuse to stop.
Mhm.
Like, and I feel like 2020 was when social media kind of was coming out of it. It's like there was this period of time where it's like, holy cow, social media is awesome for marketing.
Mhm.
And now I feel like so then like there was this like, all right, community lectures, ugh, nobody wants to come. And I want to break from doing them. And so we took that break, and I'm struggling to get back. Like our whole clinic is
Yep.
struggling to get back on the damn horse.
Yep.
And even when we have, it's like pulling teeth to get the community to like do anything because people are so busy.
Yep.
Holy shit. Like I
Yep.
love talking to you because you've been in practice. Like your experience is the same as mine. Is like it wasn't so hard to get people to come to
Mm-mm.
something before.
Mm-mm.
Right. So like
People are
how
super impulsive and short-sighted and stressed. This is one of the things I talk about a lot, is understanding the stress neurology and how it impacts people's learning and engagement and connectedness and their reactiveness and what they say and how you have to schedule them and how you have to talk to them and what, all of those things. And you nailed it. You have to have choice. You have to have options. So one of the things that we did in the pandemic is like everyone else, we did it in the Focus Academy and we did it in our practice is, we started playing with like different ideas of not just taking the same lecture and making it virtual. We tried that. And it was like, at some points it was like good, at some points it wasn't. And so, but we still did it because we're like, we have to do something every month. And I'll tell you why I think that every month is important. Besides learning, growing yourself and your skills and your team, you're right. And having that place for people to come and get the information. It's also it's about that other you develop these relationships. It's like this funnel. It's like we have all of these funnels going for how we're getting our message out, right? And one of those things, for example, is making these collaborative partnerships and relationships with other providers in town. And that's actually a lot easier than you think to do as well. And we do it kind of wrong. One, I think that historically in our profession, we talk a lot about, or we have this philosophy of like, it's us versus them. And so then we go into trying to create these relationships of like us versus them, even if it's just energetic, us versus them. It's like
Mhm.
we come from this place of us versus them, as opposed to there's a time and a place for us and them, and there's a time and a place for us or them, and that's okay. And we don't have to make people feel like they have to, if they come to us, they have to choose to be fully in our paradigm or fully in their paradigm. There's a time and a place, and most people live somewhere in between the paradigms, right? And if we want to help more people, I think it's important. We don't have to shift to that paradigm, but we do need to respect it and understand it and create an us and them environment, right?
Mhm.
And that sets the stage for our understanding, our communication, and our energy when it comes to creating relationships and rapport with patients, and also relationships and rapport with other providers so they feel safe sending people to us, even if they don't totally get what we do or don't totally, or they're not completely on board with our paradigm. It's okay. It's okay for that to be the case, right? And so that I just think that that's an important point for us to recognize. And particularly when you're talking about pediatrics and behavioral learning and socialization challenges and mental health challenges, it's really important to recognize that we don't want to ostracize people because they have a team, right? Because a lot of these people and these kids, they do have a team. They have tutors, they have educators, they have OTs, they have speech therapists. It does not need to be us versus them. But when we can simply communicate what it is that we do by finding the commonality, leading with the brain, making the case for our tool as correcting subluxation, it becomes really clear why we should be the foundation, kind of the quarterback of the team to help the whole team get better results, right? And the neuroscience backs it up. If we look at the other professions, they're looking at writing books about, publishing research about the state of the nervous system, as opposed to this behavioralist standpoint that we've always lived in of like bad behavior, bad kid, struggling reader, deficit pathology. It's like, wait, let's look at the state of the nervous system. Let's look at some of the function of the nervous system. Let's look for clues as to where we are in development. That's where primitive reflexes and eye movements and all this stuff comes in. And other professions are looking at that, but that is what we own. We just need to be able to understand it and communicate it. And then we can go into these relationships with other providers, finding that commonality, communicating, making the case, and then it becomes a really natural relationship. But they still have fear to refer to us. So that's where having a consistent community lecture allows them to make a really easy referral without feeling like they're on the hook for what happens after they make the referral. They say, hey, Dr. Amy does some interesting work. I don't fully understand it, but I've seen a lot of kids get, have great results with it. And I think she's, doing good work over there at her clinic, whatever. And so she has this community lecture. You might want to attend it. They pass that off to the parent to then say, okay, I'm going to go to this. And she has it every month. And if you can't go to the community lecture, she has the community lecture broken down into 5 short videos, and they can email that to you. That's the thing. That brings it back around to, yes, people have a short attention span. They do not have time. They do not want to make time. It is not in there. In stress neurology, we don't see the future well, timing and planning. We have less top-down prefrontal cortex. We're right here, right now. Give them something right here, right now. Right. That's where we made these like short, and we teach doctors to make these like short little 5 videos. We have them where I broke down the community lecture in these like 5 little lessons, and we can send that to them right now. And they can watch that and then get the information. Then they can come to a community lecture if they want, and usually they do. But doing that community lecture and having those other options and providing that information to, how many times in your practices do we have like parents who will say like, oh, I wish that my neighbor knew about this. And they come and get her to come. You're like, hey, just bring her to a community lecture. And I find, or a parent who gets adjusted and the kid doesn't, instead of being like trying to convince them, you just say like, you know what? I have this workshop I do about brain development. And I just find that like what people tell us is that just being a parent, it really is helpful to just get this information so that they can, gather some tools to be a more efficient parent, helps in parenting. I'd love to invite you to come, and you might have some aha moments through, and it might lead to a conversation later. And it usually does.
So the research that, you kind of keep saying, you've said multiple times, like meet them at the brain. And I feel like right now, chiropractic is like, finally, we're seeing some amazing research coming out, but like, how were you, like, did we have research that really said we affected the brain back then?
I love that question. And the reality is, if we look just within our chiropractic research, no, not really. But that's where I always say, we have to peek outside of what's happening in chiropractic and look at what's happening in what do we all know? What do we agree upon? The other professions, and look at, hey, if you look at research in autonomic nervous system function and autism. Look at research in autonomic nervous system dysfunction and behavioral challenges or learning challenges and the indicators of that. First, we have to know a little more about what that means. So like, for example, I share a ton of research from most of them are not chiropractic, they're not from chiropractic institutions. It's not chiropractic
Mhm.
research, although we're starting to have more of that. And in Focus Academy, we have a whole branch dedicated to that. We published some research this year, but we have to look outside and go, oh, we know that looking at pupil response, right, can be an indicator of increased sympathetic tone, like how, like looking at just pupillary light response, like looking at, doing shining a light in the eye, looking at the pupil response and saying, hey, how long do we see, you see the constriction and then you see the dilation, but the amount of time and the reactivity of the pupil, if you see this like shaking and this blowout or this dilation before, like typically like in a young kid, like 3 to 5 seconds, that's usually what in the neuro-optometric field they call an alpha omega pupil, which means sympathetic dominance. And so if we understand that there's all these different ways to look at the autonomic nervous system, and then we can look at the research that is citing these types of things, looking at pupil response, looking at heart rate variability, looking at, just autonomic nervous system function and the correlation between that and things like other behavioral learning and socialization challenges, there's a lot there. There's actually a lot there. And then you tie it into going, well, what do we know about subluxation? Well, we know that a
What do we
subluxation,
know?
right? What do we know? There's two components that, I always say, like, hey, we don't get to say, well, every person subluxated that walks in my office and I'm just going to adjust them. I'm like, okay, sure, maybe, possibly, probably in this world we live in, but we still have to be clinical investigators, right? Like, actually, that's the most fun part of our job, I think, because I'm a nerd, but we get to be clinical investigators and we have to make the case for ourselves first that this person is subluxated. So what is a subluxation? I say, and we teach in the academy of how to, I like systems and I like simplicity, like getting all the complexity and finding the simplicity. We go, there has to be a structural or movement component and a neurological component. So what are we doing on our exams to look for structural? That's where we might have x-rays, posture, range of motion, tonality, all that stuff, right? Muscular, tonality is what I'm talking about there. And then
Parts exam.
asymmetry. Yeah. And then, yeah. And then like neurological piece, like maybe you do thermography, maybe you do heart rate variability, maybe you do the reflex app looking at pupils, maybe you just use a pen light and look at pupils. We teach all of these different varying, you don't have to do all of them, but we need to have something in those categories to say, we're looking at structure and nervous system interference. And so autonomic function or dysfunction or imbalance or inefficiencies. And then the second part of that, this is where it ties together with how we look at the research, say, what does this mean to me? How do we bring this into practice, find the simplicity? And then we go, okay, subluxation. Now what's going on what we call a functional brain-based exam, right? So this is where we tie in like primitive reflexes and gross motor and fine motor and eye movements and auditory verbal, cognitive function, all of this to say, I'm seeing altered neurological function and indicators of subluxation. I'm also seeing that this 7-year-old is having abnormal eye movements and they have primitive reflexes and they have trouble with recall of a story that I just told them. So they're having visual cognitive deficit. Makes sense that they'd be having trouble in school. Makes sense they'd be having trouble attending to future events and therefore multi-step instructions. We'll start correcting subluxation, monitoring the functional brain-based exam to see changes. And all of this, when we can have all of that, there's actually a ton of research to help us kind of put those pieces together, but we have to put the pieces together.
Mm-hmm. Where did you learn this? Because it wasn't school.
It wasn't school. No, it wasn't school. Gosh, that's the big question. Well, a lot of this came from, and I would say just so much of it came from neurooptometry. I grew up with a brother with challenges and behavioral and learning challenges. And my dad was a typical optometrist, lenses, 20/20 vision. And long story short, he basically was like, what's going on with my kid? And he became specialized in his field and became a neuro-optometrist, or they're strange, like chiropractors. They have a few different names. Most people have never heard of them. Neuro-optometrist, developmental optometrist, or behavioral optometrist. Same thing. All they're doing is they're very similar to functional neurologists. They do a lot with body movements and eye movements and vestibular function and eye movements. And they look at the eye movements and say, hey, the eyes are the only part of the brain sticking out of the head. Eye movements and abnormal eye movements tell us a lot about brain function. And this is very well known in like neuro rehab and traumatic brain injuries
Mhm.
and behavioral learning, socialization challenges in kids. And so I grew up, like some people grow up as chiropractic kids, like in the back of lectures and seminars. And I grew up in the back of lectures and seminars and as a neuro-optometric kid, like, inappropriate, love my dad, super intellectual, very inappropriately teaching me about neurology at like 7. Like really weird way to grow up. But it shaped my worldview. Like I just knew this, I just had this perspective going into chiropractic. And then when I went into chiropractic, I was at Sherman and I went like literally first or second quarter. The philosophy made sense to me based on my worldview and what I knew. But then I started learning the neurology and I was like, wait a minute. These people, chiropractors, need to be talking to these people, neuro-optometrists. And there was also a big bridge in there with neuroeducation in my background because of how it all works with neurooptometry. And I was like, and then nutrition, I learned along the way, and the biomed approaches and methylation, all this stuff. I started picking up all of these things. And I was like, how does this stuff all go together? They need to go together. And I just went, well, I guess I'm the one to do it. I guess that's what I'm here to do. And so that's what I've been doing. And I think because I was immersed in such complex concepts at such a young age,
Mhm.
it shaped my neurology. And so I learned to go, what does this mean to me? And how do I find the simplicity in this? And so that's, I think, my superpower is finding the simplicity in the complexity. Even though I enjoy the complexity, I find the simplicity and make systems, clinical systems. And that's what I've done. I never intended to teach this stuff. I just wanted to do this work and develop it and help people with this work in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And then what started to happen was chiropractors, friends of mine would be like, can you help my kid?
Mhm.
I'd be like, well, you live in Nebraska. I don't know. And so then we'd like try some stuff and they'd come out and we do exams. And then I'd give them, and then the next one, and we'd go like, oh, yeah, okay. And then I'd start teaching them. And then eventually it was like, okay, all right, there are some people outside of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho that want to be principled chiropractors, but lead with the brain and know how to put these things together. And unfortunately, we have a massive rise in the amount of families that need help with this. So,
Okay, so I have two scenarios and I want to know how you handle each in clinic. So you've got
mhm,
scenario one where you've got a parent with brings their kid and they're not doing anything. Like they are like, what do you mean red dye? Like the
yeah,
kid's coming in eating Fruit Loops. Okay.
I know the type. Yeah.
Yes. Not on Medicaid. Well,
Maybe
honestly, in this
medication.
scenario, they probably would be on Medicaid, but there's nothing. Okay.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
and how do you pick and choose?
Mhm.
Because it's like the
Wow.
adjustment, fantastic, but like when do you start layering in? Do you start layering in? Like you brought up methylation of like, hey, I'm assuming like, do you refer that out? And like, when do you start? How much? Because like some chiropractors, they're principled chiropractic and they're like, none of that matters. The
Right,
only thing that matters is the nervous system. I don't talk about nutrition. I
right,
don't talk about that.
right. Love that. Oh, that was such a beautiful question. It's almost like I told you to ask me that
I
question, but I
didn't, but
didn't.
you didn't though.
We are just on the same page.
Yeah.
Girl, we are friends. Yeah.
Well, be prepared because the second one is the parent who comes in and is doing
Oh,
everything.
yeah, I love that one
So
too.
we'll start with this
Um,
one.
okay, so first of all, again, I love systems. And I call this the chiropractic dilemma. Like a couple of, first of all, of knowing how to like, I love that you use the term layering these things in. I call them pillars, right? We have to respect that there's different pillars to this. And I am your straightest mixer you're ever going to meet when it comes to chiropractic, because chiropractic has to be the foundation. And I think that absolutely, like in this dilemma, we have chiropractors who are like, yeah, but it has to be the foundation and only. And I'm like, absolutely, it has to be the foundation. And we don't want to lose that. And everything needs to be founded in that. However, We have with our limitations of matter, and we have a massive sea of stress that we live in, physical, chemical, emotional stress. And just like you would tell a patient that, if they were just sitting all day and not moving their body and eating fast food every day, like you would make some suggestions there, and you should probably talk to them about that. That even if that's all you do is in your practice, you're like, I want to correct subluxation, but at least I want to talk about this. That's fine. Or maybe you want to find a lot of depth in what we call pillar 2, which is diet, biomed, inflammation, nutrition. Pillar 1 is chiropractic. Pillar 2 is the nutrition. You can find as much simplicity or depth as long as you respect, like we do all of these pillars. Pillar 1, chiropractic. Pillar 2, diet, nutrition, all of that. Pillar 3, which I do a medium depth in that. And then I have partners, I know a lot of depth in that. I don't enjoy doing a lot of that in my practice. So I need to be able to recognize, and we train doctors to be able to recognize, like, hey, some people are going to need a little bit beyond taking food dyes out and maybe looking at inflammation and food intolerances and those types of things. I do like middle of the road on that pillar. But sometimes, like, we have a pandas case, like chronic strep, mold exposure, and we have to be able to recognize or see the signs that might be going on, and that's what we teach. And then have a specific partner. Like, we have some telehealth partners that are focus certified so that they respect the chiropractic piece and they understand it, but they can help that family in support of that pillar. Okay, so that, and then third pillar, because this will help me answer that question too. Third pillar is what we call brain blossom or neuro-deflective retraining, which is the brain and body exercises, the neuro rehab piece, the eye movements, the cognitive games, that piece. And then
So
pillar
like
4.
rehab exercises for the
Yeah,
parent to do at home.
primitive reflexes. We do them either in the office. We have brain building stations, and then we have the Brain Blossom app that our focus doctors can use. And it's me going through these different tracks. So the doctor doesn't really need to understand when do I do what exercise. They just need to follow the system of knowing when do I add that pillar in. And then, like, they work with us, and the parents just do the app at home. And it's all based on these 8 hierarchies of development. So, because it's not about just like going, oh, there's a primitive reflex or there's an eye movement convergence issue. Let's just do pencil push-ups all day long, or let's do this reflex integration exercise. It's about doing the right thing at the right time, because you can also create problems if you do them at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm like, I don't want to, like, most doctors aren't going to want to, like, I don't really want to have doctors create this whole neurosensory gym in their office. Like, some people want that. Most people don't. I want to teach chiropractors and what we do to keep the foundation of chiropractic, and then find simplicity in utilizing these other things so that we're not in that chiropractic dilemma of burying our head in the sand and saying none of those things matter, because they do. They do matter in reality. And then the 4th pillar is brain-based parenting and mentoring. And that's teaching and helping parents and people develop brain-based lens to understand how to create right now strategies to support parents in parenting and behavior and academics, of just little, like, by understanding more about the brain, we can give suggestions for, like, here's a thing that's going to help you right now with that big challenge you're having, which speaks to we have a demographic of people who are very short-sighted because they're in stress and they need, like, right now, while they're still tied into the long-term clinical solution. So that's the foundation for how we work with everybody, but there's a varying degree, because you can't, like, throw up all that on anybody who comes in, because that's too much information, too much stuff. So if you have the family that comes in who's like standard American family, like they're not living in our paradigm yet, but they're coming to us. We say, listen, there's a reason, we meet them where they are. There's a reason for behavior, and there's strategies we teach on how to set up your office, of, like, so that they see that we're approaching things differently. We're creating a brain-based environment that's healthy and they feel safe in, as opposed to, like, most places they go, they feel judged. They feel like they're failing. They feel like it's them or their kid's bad or they're bad parents. And so we're building rapport, which is important for learning and retention, engagement, all that. And we say, listen, we know there's a reason that there's this challenge going on. So we have to, utilize our skills to look for the underlying reason. We ask and answer 2 big questions. One is, are there indicators of altered nervous system function? Like, basically, is your child's brain in this, like, ultimate fight or flight mode, or is there altered input to the brain that's altering processing and output? And then the second one is we have to look at what tools your child is using based on where they are in development or where they may have had some gaps in development that may be impacting the tools that they have to engage with, learning, socialization, developmental process. And none of that means like you're bad. It just means we need to see where they are. Then we can determine which clinical tools in which order are the appropriate thing for your child. And so then we always start with chiropractic. And I do not start chiropractic and nutrition at the same time. Even if you're like, this is a disaster, like I need to get this kid off, making these dietary changes. If you start them at the exact same time, one, we have too many variables. And two, what happens. They're like, oh, it's not the chiropractic. Thanks for making that suggestion on the diet. And they're gone. And they've lost them. And that's not just like a marketing thing. That's like oh no, they're
Diet
not
will only get them so far. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we start the chiropractic, but we're educating on the 4 pillars. We're doing that in a very specific way that works with the brain and stress, with visuals and all this stuff. And then we have our first re-exam where we ask and answer the 2 questions again. Then we layer in the nutrition on top of the chiropractic. And then we do another re-exam, ask and answer the 2 questions again.
Did I miss? What are the 2 questions that you ask at the re-exam?
2 questions. 1, indicators of altered neurological function, input, processing, output. That's our subluxation exam. In our subluxation exam, there's 2 pieces, function or the structural and neurological. So I break it down into systems. Second question, but this is how I educate parents. I'm asking my job, can I help your kid? I don't know. I need to ask and answer 2 big questions. 1, nervous system function. 2, what tools is your child using based on where they are in development and or where gaps may be in development during their developmental process if they're an older kid or an adult. And that's where we look at, this is what we call our functional brain-based exam. That's where we look at primitive reflexes, gross motor function, fine motor function, auditory verbal function, eye movements, and visual cognitive function. We have to assess that so we can see, does it make sense that this child is having a behavior problem, a reading challenge, whatever it may be. So then we ask and answer those questions, and we do that on every exam and every re-exam. So we're anchored to the concept of we ask and answer these 2 questions. Here's the results. Here's when we add things in and layer things in. And they know there's 4 pillars: chiropractic, which is about altered input, processing, output, and autonomic function; nutrition, diet, biomed, whatever we might need to do there, is pillar 2. Pillar 3 is the brain-based exercises. Pillar 4 is the brain-based parenting and mentoring, which is ongoing. So we layer in the different clinical tools, different pillars, different clinical tools as warranted by what we find on the exams and re-exams. And typically it's first re-exam, we then start to layer in the nutrition. Second re-exam, we start to layer in we have chiropractic, we have nutrition, and now we're adding in the brain-based games and exercises, depending on the case, but that's typically how that goes. And ongoing, we're giving brain-based support and mentoring in our table talk, in private Facebook groups, or in private groups on an app, or however you do that, in a course that you give, we have that in Brain Blossom for our doctors. It's me giving that in courses, but it's really important. And so really, when you have the parent who comes in, who's like, we haven't done anything, that's literally, they get that. And that's where we start. And it feels like, okay, it's one step at a time, but we're addressing all of these things. Airway comes in there. Sometimes we have to look at airway and tongue ties. That's a big piece of it. And that can be layered in as well, very specifically. And it's pretty easy to do when we do it in a systematic way. And the other thing is when you have a patient that comes in that's like done all the things, right?
All right, hold on though.
Okay.
Because I have many questions with that.
Please.
Okay. So you said, okay, hold on. I forgot my questions.
Sorry.
That's all right. I have a little bit of ADHD where I've had like 17 questions through this process where I'm like, oh my God.
You just interrupt me because I'm a talker. Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the kid honestly, the biggest thing is they're on medication. And like,
this is what I say. I say, listen, and this goes to that us versus them concept. Oftentimes parents feel judged already. By the time if they're coming into your office, they're already feeling kind of, most of them, 90% of them are feeling like, a little insecure that their kid is on medication. Because most people, that's not what they want to do, particularly the type of people that are coming to you also. There's still
Mhm.
something. And so I just say this. I just say, like, look, there's a time and a place. I understand. My goal is not to tell you to take your kid off medication, but all of our goal, and I always like to create this all like, what do we all agree upon?
Mhm.
Your GP's goal, your goal, my goal, all of our goal is to improve underlying function enough to where your child would not have a need for this medication. Are we on the same page with that? And that's how we don't shame, but we acknowledge that it's like, probably not where we want to be. Probably wouldn't, but I'm not shaming you and I understand
Right.
there's a place. And then I say, so here's what we're going to do to address that underlying function to help your child have a better expression of life. I need to ask two questions, two big questions on my clinical exam to see what's going on with your child.
How do you have to change your exam knowing that that nervous system is being so altered?
I don't change my exam, but I change my interpretation
Okay.
of the exam, of the findings, because what you can see is you can see changes or differences in like the autonomic response, for example, in the subluxation portion, in the first question is the subluxation. We're looking for subluxation. There's a structural and there's a neurological component. You can see differences than you would expect with like heart rate variability, with thermography, with pupil response, because we're altering the autonomic nervous system, right? And so I just say that. I just say, we do have medications on board. That is the purpose of that is to have an alteration of the function of the system. And so we're just taking this as this is where we are right now. And this is our starting point, and we might see things change, but we're looking at this is where it's looking at the big picture, and we can't just be this is kind of a challenge, I think, in our profession a little bit when it comes to pediatrics is like even doctors that are doing great at looking at like scans and like and I love I use the Insight, good friends with Dave Fletcher, like we use that and some other things, but um we can't be treating scans. Oftentimes, like what we'll see is that instead of understanding the big picture of why we might be seeing certain things on scans and having the functional brain-based exam to look at it all, we're in this kind of place of like, I'm just looking to see changes on a scan.
Mhm.
And that is now treating a scan. We've moved into a mechanistic approach.
Mhm.
And then what
Mhm.
happens, and doctors out there, I'm sorry, we've all been in this place before, and I'm sorry if you can relate to this, but it's like you go in and you go, well, I really sold these scans and I like, I understand that it's because it's an indicator of autonomic function and I'm going into a re-exam and maybe the child is symptomatically doing better, but their scans look worse.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe their scans look better, but the child's doing worse.
Mhm.
Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that that would make a ton of sense if we just include this functional brain-based exam to look at where they are in development and what the consequences are for altered autonomic function. Just like if we're on medication and now let's say we're doing so much better that we're starting to have more awareness of self. This is one of the hierarchies we talk about. Now, this child is having more regulation of themselves, and now they're attending outside of themselves, and they're actually starting to have more socialization, like picking up on social cues better, having more appropriate touching and socialization. And this is a win that this child wasn't having before, but it's also stress. There's also potential stress that comes with that. And now this child who was like, yeah, they're really socially awkward, but they're so happy. Now the parents are like, yeah, they're really like kind of sad. Like they're recognizing that they don't fit in with other kids now, where before they weren't sad. So we're having these wins that like they're appropriately socializing, but now they're recognizing that they aren't fitting in as well and they're sad. And parents are like, what'd you do to my kid? And you're like, but the scans look better.
Mhm. Oh, that sounds really heartbreaking.
But the thing is that if we know to prepare parents for that based on looking at these functional brain-based exams and being able to understand simply, and it really can be pretty simple once you learn the foundation of knowing like, okay, I expect that your child is going to start to have this outward awareness. And with that, since your child's 10 and didn't really go through that at like 3 to 5 when they typically do, you might notice that they have some challenges with that emotionally. And so we just want to, this is the brain-based parenting. We just want to help them through that, expect that, and support them specifically in that while we're doing this. By the way, we might see more stress on their nervous system assessment because now they're in a state of top-down stress.
Mhm.
That's a pretty typical thing, trajectory to predict. They're having more regulation of self. They're not as hyperactive and impulsive. They're attending outside of self. And now they're having different types of feelings. And now that's a different type of stress. And now we have a scan that shows, well, like the presentation is the hyperactivity is better, which is why they came. But now I have a kid who's kind of having some, sadness and anxiety, and their scans look worse. And the parents, unless we know how to explain that to me and to our focus docs, it's like, that makes sense, and it's a what we call a predictable stop along the way,
Right.
as opposed to knowing, is this like a true like regression? Is it a new challenge? We have to be able to differentiate that, and it's not just based on one piece like
Right.
scans. That's where when somebody's on medication, we have to consider all of that.
Right. Okay, I remembered my questions and they're still relevant.
Mhm.
Okay, so obviously the answer here is it depends on what my exam findings are. Okay. But are you starting patients at like average behavior
Mhm.
case 3 times a week for 4 months? Is that what I've kind of been putting together with the pillars and the like
Mhm. Typically, 2 to 3 times a week, usually 2 times a week, maybe the first few weeks,
why
3 times.
usually?
Usually 2 times a week because that's as like, we have to think about the stressors for the family too, and
Mhm.
longevity of layering these things in.
Yeah.
So 2 times a week, beginning of the week, a Monday, Thursday, something like that is ideal, is what I find to be ideal for usually about 6 months until I start to see. I do the full re-exam where we're asking and answering the 2 questions every 3 months. Usually at 3 months, we're layering in the nutrition. Usually at
Oh,
6
so the
months,
first re-exam isn't until like closer to 3 months.
the full re-exam. Yep,
Okay,
yep, we do
full.
it every single 3 months. Yep.
Okay.
Every 3 months, we do the ask and answer the 2 big questions, re-exams, typically at 3 months. Like I said, very systematic, and all of our
Yep.
focus doctors, they do this, as well, and, or some variation of it, and sometimes we start people in those first 3 months at more frequency, and sometimes we don't. That's where it depends on the scan, it depends on how they're doing. I
Right.
always say care plans, "Hey, mom, dad, this is my clinical best guess." It's
Yep.
based on a lot of experience and knowledge, but it's still my clinical best guess.
So one of the layers of my professional career or my self-development journey, I will say, is realizing how much hyper control I have tried to push onto my patients through like, this is how I get results. So it's my way or the highway. And I just interviewed Simon Floriani. The
Mm,
man is
mhm,
Jesus. I swear to God.
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
and it was just talking about this, like meeting the patient where they're at on all these other layers. So, what do you do, especially being such a specialist, like in such a, I'm doing the Idaho scenario here, up
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
Watch on YouTube, people, and you can see my gestures. Uh, what do you do when you've got someone who's like, I can do once a week and that's it?
Yeah. I mean, that absolutely does happen, and I will say, I love that you said that because, girl, I'm with you there. In the beginning of my career, I laugh at
You
myself, and
shall not
yeah,
pass.
I remember I used to say, "Listen, if you will not, take gluten, dairy, and food dyes out of your kid's diet, you cannot be in my program."
We can laugh about it because it's like,
Oh my gosh, I
that
laugh with
was
my
how I
team about
felt
it.
I needed to show up. Yep.
Yep. I was like, "Listen," because 'cause I'm, like, a very direct Midwestern girl too, right? I was just like, "Listen," and the thing is, most of the time people, you know, I think they're like, we have this joke in our office, like, when I was the main adjusting doctor, people don't leave, like, my retention is, like, gold, like, they don't leave. The only time they leave is when I go on vacation. 'Cause they'd have to, like, sneak away in the night, so I'd be like, my husband and I had this joke, it's not funny, but it kind of is funny that it'd be like, "We're going on vacation, like, at least there's gonna be one patient It wasn't like a lot of patients that would leave, but like one patient, because they don't want to like tell me, like they don't want to disappoint me, right? And so they like send an email or something, which is ridiculous. Um, So it's part of my journey as well. And I was very like, if you aren't going to take them off of gluten, dairy, and food diet, like, what are we even doing here?
Right.
And I'm doing the chiropractic piece. You got to do your piece. Like we're doing this together. And that's just ridiculous. That was early in my career.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it important? Yes. Do we have to meet people there? Yes. Do we have people that drive like a really far way? Yes. Can sometimes they not come twice a week? Yes. 3 times a week? Yes. Do they live in massive stress to where sometimes getting their kid out of the car and into our office, is like not going to happen? Like we work with really challenging kids with really, big deflective and avoidance
Yeah.
behaviors. That's why they're here. So that's where understanding the parent neurology, meeting where they are, but not compromising. Because that was, and I bet you can relate to this. Like that was
Yeah.
one of the
Because like,
things
is
when,
once a week gonna
right.
do anything? Like,
And so I would say, and this is what I say still, I'm like, listen, I give them my best recommendation. And most of the time that's where we're at. And sometimes it's not possible for whatever reason. And we just say, okay, well, I need to have a direct conversation. Like it can't be like, oh, the staff then just schedules them differently, or it's like a casual thing here, there. There needs to be like a peg, like a time, a moment in time where we look at each other in the eyes and say, I just need you to understand that this is not, you hired me, and this is the language I use. Like, and I do it kindly, and I'm not doing it like as direct as I would have when I was like younger, but I say, you hired me to give you my best recommendation based on my expertise and my experience. This is my best recommendation. I just want to make sure we're like really clear and on the same page with that. Like, yes, now I understand that you drive from 2 hours away or whatever. If what we can do is this, let's give it a try. But I need to reserve the right to come back to you and have a conversation and reference this conversation and say, we're
this isn't
not
working.
this isn't working. We need to modify something. And so like, if you use that pre-framing and that language, that when they come back, like if you need to do that, you can just reference, remember that conversation we had, and then you hired me. I want to get you results. I know this work works. We have to do it. And this is what I think we need to do at this point. And then it's like this collaborative, we're in this together. It's, as opposed to if you don't have that direct conversation, this is something I work with our doctors a lot on. If you just kind of make the modification, but you don't have this moment in time,
Then the parent gets mad at you
then
2-3 months in, and it's like, well,
yes,
fuck you. You only came once, and I told you to
right.
come more than that.
That's right. And it's the same thing with like staff and keeping people on their care plans. Like if someone misses an appointment and they're like, well, I don't want to bother them or whatever. I'm like, hey, and this is the training we give. I'm like, they are exchanging their time and money for our expertise. And we made an agreement with them. And if they're just all of a sudden coming once a week instead of twice a week, and like, oh, now it's a pattern and it's not just like it happened once, and we're not reminding them of that, and we're not keeping our side of the road clean, what happens is down the road, they think they've followed the care plan because again, they're living in stress. They're not living in our world.
I know exactly what you mean. They
Yeah, and
think
so they think
because
they
we're
did.
allowing it.
That's right. We didn't keep our side of the road clean, and therefore we did not stay in congruence with staying in integrity with doing our job they hired us to do, which they're exchanging their time and money for. And so that's on us. And then they get down the road and they're like, I don't know. I think we have karate 3 nights a week and it's kind of hard to get here. And so then they have, my husband said it's too expensive or this or that, whatever. And so then they're like, and it doesn't work anyways. And then here's the huge issue with that. One, we don't get to help that kid or that family because
They wrote off
potentially
chiropractic.
because, yeah. And then they say, I tried chiropractic. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I'm like,
you didn't try it. You
didn't try it,
do
but
what I told you to do.
you
But in
didn't do
their
it.
head, they think they did.
They did. They absolutely did because we didn't tell them that they weren't doing it. And that's where having one of our agreements in our office and in our culture in the academy is having direct conversations and we are committed to having the difficult conversations because like, is it fun to be like, hey, this is what I said I was going to do. This is what you said you were going to do. We need to come up with why are we not doing it?
Mhm.
You know, nobody wants to have difficult conversations, but they're important, and they don't have to be that difficult either. Like
Right.
it's just doing what we're hired to do,
Mhm.
you know? And
Amy, you're a delight. I mean, I haven't diagnosed your Enneagram. I don't know what your husband does. Like this could just keep going. I, I would make a joke about like, how have we not run across paths? It's like, well, because you live in bumfuck Idaho and I live
yeah,
in bumfuck Wisconsin.
yeah,
And
true.
apparently we go to different
Yeah,
seminars. So,
apparently.
okay, where can people get more? Because
Okay.
I have like 3 more hours of questions, but we're gonna cut it off. But where can
Uh,
people get more? We can always do a
Bummer,
part
because
2.
I love you too, and
I
I'm
know.
just looking forward to our
I
future
just do this
relationship.
there's actually not listeners. I just do this for friends.
Great. Well, I mean, you could have just asked me to have coffee. I would have done that too.
That's true.
I'm at that point, and I'm sure you are too in my career where I'm like, I don't know, like we're just let me meet cool people and do cool things
Yes.
with my time, and
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
want to do. Okay, so let's see. The Focus Academy. I have a certification series. It's got an online portion of prerequisite learning beforehand, and then there's a live in-person seminar we sell out every year. I only do it once a year
Mm.
because, you know, that's what I want to do because
Right.
I am a mom and I have a practice and all the things. And we're actually, instead of in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this year, we're doing our live training at Sherman on campus to bring it to that part of the country. And that is in March, March 1st and 2nd. And we are like 70% sold out already for that. And so if people are interested in joining our certification series, it really, really is about finding the simplicity with all this stuff and giving you really like, here's my systems of moving forward, like staying principled in chiropractic, but learning how to lead with that brain and really be
Mhm.
that in your community. And so um, that's that. We have a lot of other courses and things I offer as well. I'm actually about to do a challenge, which is just like a 4-day thing in mid-September, but our website is gofocusacademy.com. You can find us on Facebook. I'm really bad at social media because remember, I'm old like you.
You're right.
Yeah. So dramyfocus.com or Dr. Amy Focus. And then we have that on Instagram as well. I'll send you the stuff. I'm literally just learning how to do Instagram because people like, I don't know if you know Stephanie Libs. If you don't, you should have her on here.
Yeah.
Um,
I
she,
actually okay, side note, this is how either old I'm getting, how long I've been doing this is a comment on something. So Stephanie Libs, yes, I know. And I was like going down her Instagram train the other day and I was
yeah,
like, I should have her on the podcast.
yeah.
I freaking did like 100 episodes ago. I'm like,
I love
oh,
you.
okay.
You
What
should
did
have
I
her
talk
again.
to her about? And I had to look, and the title is like boobies. Like we talk
Oh
about
yeah, it would
booby, and I
be.
was like, oh, maybe I should have her back on.
You
That's
should
not a
have her back
comment
on.
on her. I believe her episode was fantastic, but I just
Girl,
hmm,
she's fantastic. She's our people. The three of us in one little Zoom meeting would be really funny. I first heard her speak at the ICPA last year. I was at the ICPA gathering speaking and she was too. And I was like, who's this lady? And literally there's just a picture on the big, screens of like her breastfeeding. And the first thing she says is like, yeah, those are my boobies. And I was like, who is this woman? And why is she not my best friend?
right, right.
But she is a focus doctor now too. And she is like, pediatric and breastfeeding and
Mhm.
babies and all this stuff. And she's like, why would I want to do neuro stuff? And then she's like a great testament to like, yeah, I took this because she liked my energy. And she
Yeah,
was like, I really don't work. I want to work with like kids with challenges. She's like, she's like, I realize now that I took it, it helped me like, it's really expanded my practice and
right.
understanding what I'm doing with these babies more. And so, anyways, I don't remember why. Oh, she told me, she's like, Amy, you have to do Instagram. And
Instagram.
I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it. She's like, you have to. I was like,
You have
"All right,
to.
I'm
You don't
learning.
have to do TikTok, but you have to do Instagram.
I'm not doing TikTok, but you can look at our Instagram and you can see that I'm trying.
Good. Good. You know what? The days of the perfect Instagram are gone anyway, so
Well,
this is
ain't
great.
nothing perfect over here, so we're good.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much.
You.
This was really fun. And yes, let's get Steph. Let's get,
Oh
I
my
was going to
god.
say a threesome, but like now my brain won't think of a different word besides threesome going.
Yeah, threesome, yeah.
We'll just do the thing. Anyways.
Yeah, we'll get the threesome going, that'll be perfect. That
Okay.
that trio, would be
Trio. There's a good word. There's a good
that trio would be we need a couple hours and, that
yes.
would be fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll find a schedule. Well, with we have open schedules, so I'm sure it'll
Yeah, oh
be
yeah.
super easy.
Oh, it'll be easy, yeah. Mhm.
All right, She Slayers. Until next week. Bye.